Bonjour, greetings, good morning. I am Winslow Sargent, the incoming chair for the International Council for Small Business. We're so pleased to have you here today for this session. ICSB is the largest organization focused on MSMEs. Welcome to our World Congress opening event, Entrepreneurs on the Road to Recovery. This opening panel enables us to discuss the challenges and opportunities of recovery by entrepreneurs and small businesses. I want to thank our partners, EPAG, ESCA, and OECD. I also want to give a thank you to our partner for MSME Day, the government of Argentina. Everyone in this room today has experienced the uncertainty, the havoc, the mayhem that the COVID-19 pandemic has wrought over the last year. There is virtually no aspect of life in 2021 that has not been impacted by this new disease, and virtually no aspect of life that looks the same as it did in 2019. As members of the global MSME community, we had to witness our fellow entrepreneurs face various difficulties with varying degrees of assistance from their governments. We had to pivot in order to survive, and we have come out on the other end having learned valuable information about business dynamism, innovation, and resilience in the face of extreme adversity. Today, we will open Policy Day with a frank discussion around challenges and opportunities of recovery driven by entrepreneurs and small businesses, building on the 2021 OECD SME and Entrepreneurship Outlook. Today's session will begin with messages from two key ministers, then we'll turn to a panel discussion in which each panelist will be asked to share with us the ways in which their organizations are aiding entrepreneurs in their route to recovery. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce today's panel. Alexis Loveilly, the Deputy Director, Cabinet of Minister Alain Brassi, representing the French perspective. Lamia Kamal Chawasi, the Director, Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities, and Ahmed Osman, the Chair of the Board for the International Council for Small Business. They're joining us in person. Then joining us online, I want to welcome Aubert Gomes, the Deputy Director General and SME Coordinator in the Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship, and SMEs at the European Commission. Inez Rocha, the Director for Financial Products, SME, and Finance and Development Team, EBRD, and Thibault Bessoton, the President of Cosmos Division of ENEA. I welcome you all and want to thank you all for joining us at this monumental and important event. Now, I would like to introduce my co-moderator for today's panel, Celine Kaufman. She is the head of OECD Center for Entrepreneurship Division on Entrepreneurship, SME, and Tourism. She has been a vital player in the creation and execution of this panel today, as well as the entire World Congress. Please join me in welcoming Celine Kaufman to present our first speaker.
Merci beaucoup, Winslow, et bonjour à tous. Je suis ravie d'être avec vous aujourd'hui. C'est un plaisir de vous accueillir au nom de l'OCDE à cette session pour ceux d'entre vous qui ne connaîtraient pas l'OCDE encore par cœur. L'OCDE est l'organisation internationale qui regroupe les gouvernements des pays pour pouvoir réfléchir ensemble, développer des données en soutien à des politiques économiques. Donc ce matin, la session que nous organisons se focalise sur les entrepreneurs et sur les PME. Et c'est un grand plaisir de pouvoir, à cette occasion, accueillir effectivement Alexis Loyer, directeur adjoint au cabinet du ministre Alain Griset, qui est donc en charge des PME en France. Et vous êtes avec nous en personne, nous apprécions beaucoup, pour ouvrir cette session au nom de votre ministre, malgré un agenda que nous savons très chargé au vu des dernières annonces présidentielles. Je sais aussi que vous n'avez pas beaucoup de temps et que vous devrez partir après votre intervention, mais merci encore pour cette intervention. Et juste pour pouvoir appuyer votre intervention et vous donner l'élan pour cette intervention, la question que nous avons pour vous, c'est au vu des données internationales, la crise du Covid-19 a atteint les auto-entrepreneurs, les PME et les entrepreneurs de façon générale, de façon extrêmement violente. Et la France ne fait pas exception dans ce panorama international. Mais peut-être peut-on quand même envisager la lumière au bout du tunnel. Alors comment les autorités françaises ont-elles fait face à cette période plus que tumultueuse? Et comment voyez-vous la reprise du point de vue de la France? Alexis Loyer, merci encore et bienvenue.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Well, my name is Alex Loyer, so I'm not the minister. I hope you will not be so disappointed. But the minister had a very complicated agenda today. He had a commitment, important commitment, so he entrusted me with a very heavy responsibility to try to represent him, and I hope I will live up to that responsibility. So now I will have to switch to French because I'm representing the minister. Sorry for that, and thank you to the interpreters. Alors, ce que je voudrais vous présenter en quelques minutes, c'est un bref retour d'expérience sur la manière dont le gouvernement français et particulièrement le ministère en charge des PME que je représente a pu gérer la crise, la pandémie, donc le ministère en charge des PME, et en quoi les PME sont également une des clés du succès de la reprise qui est déjà à l'œuvre. Car en effet, la reprise a commencé de manière assez rapide en France. Aujourd'hui, on prévoit différentes prévisions tablent sur une croissance qui pourrait atteindre 6% en 2021. Donc la reprise est partout. Le moral des entreprises est élevé, ce qu'on appelle le climat des affaires est à un niveau très élevé. Donc la reprise est bien là. Et si elle est là, c'est parce que les entreprises ont résisté, parce que les PME notamment ont résisté. Je rappelle que mon ministre, comme il aime le dire lui-même, est responsable de 95% des entreprises françaises, à 95% du PIB et 95% de l'ensemble du tissu économique. C'est un peu le public que nous traitons au quotidien. Et nous sommes un ministère très tourné vers les PME, vers les artisans, vers les indépendants, vers les auto-entrepreneurs, et avec lesquels nous échangeons. Nous avons des capteurs un peu dans tous les territoires. Alors, la première question qu'on peut se poser, c'est ces PME, ces TPE, de très petites entreprises qui ont été durement frappées par la crise, où elles en sont aujourd'hui. On a longtemps parlé d'effondrement, on a longtemps craint, alors on va dire que les esprits, les pessimistes parlaient d'un effondrement de l'ensemble des PME, TPE en France. Or, ce qu'on voit aujourd'hui, c'est que les PME, TPE ont plutôt bien résisté, et que même si leur activité n'a pas retrouvé le niveau d'avant-crise, on est encore loin, même si d'ailleurs au premier trimestre 2021, il y a eu une augmentation de près de 5% de l'activité des PME-TPE, ça n'a pas suffi à rattraper le niveau d'avant-crise. En revanche, leur rentabilité s'est bien améliorée, elle a augmenté de 2%. Donc quand on parle d'effondrement des TPE-PME,
Aujourd'hui, le chiffre qu'on a, c'est l'augmentation des résultats nets. Donc ça, c'est des informations qui proviennent de l'ensemble des experts comptables, c'est des liasses fiscales qui ont été traitées. Et donc la rentabilité, elle est là, dans tous les secteurs, et en particulier dans les secteurs qui ont un fort contenu de main-d'œuvre et qui ont été ceux qui ont été le plus frappés par la crise. La rentabilité, par exemple, dans l'hôtellerie-restauration, café, la rentabilité nette des entreprises a augmenté de 10% en 2020 par rapport à 2019. Donc la rentabilité là, c'était la première information que je voulais vous donner. La deuxième chose, c'est que non seulement la rentabilité est là, même si l'activité n'est pas encore à retrouver son niveau d'avant-crise, mais les faillites ne se sont pas produites. On a beaucoup parlé de tsunami, de cascade de faillites, d'effondrement, de dépôt de bilan. On pensait tous que le 7 octobre, ça allait être un cataclysme. Pourquoi le 7 octobre? C'est parce que pendant la crise sanitaire, avec les mesures d'urgence, il a été décidé de suspendre ce qu'on appelle les procédures collectives lorsqu'une entreprise est en cessation de paiement. Normalement, elle a 45 jours pour engager une procédure collective, redressement judiciaire, sauvegarde. Et donc, ça portait la date au 7 octobre. Donc, à partir du 7 octobre 2020, on s'attendait à avoir des faillites partout. Or, ces faillites ne se sont pas produites. Le niveau de défaillance d'entreprise en 2020 est à son plus bas historique. On est à plus de 30, normalement, on est à 50 000 défaillances d'entreprises par an à peu près. On est plutôt à 29 000 actuellement sur les 12 derniers mois. Alors, c'était plutôt 50 000 les 12 derniers mois avant la crise. Donc, là aussi, assez peu de défaillances. De nombreux instituts pensent qu'on sera, certains disent 33 000, 35 000 à la fin 2021. D'autres sont plus pessimistes et considèrent qu'il va y avoir un effet de rattrapage malgré tout et qu'on retrouvera, mais peut-être en 2022, 50 000 ou 60 000. Et aujourd'hui, les faillites ne sont pas là. Et pourquoi? Parce que tous les dispositifs de soutien aux entreprises qui ont été mis en œuvre, et que je vais décrire un peu rapidement ensuite, ont joué un rôle d'amortisseur. Donc les entreprises sont plus endettées, leur endettement, les PME, les TPE, alors, en 2020, ont augmenté de 9%, parce que beaucoup d'entre elles ont souscrit ce qu'on appelle un prêt garanti par l'État. C'est des prêts qui ont été accordés par les banques avec une garantie de 90% de l'État. Et ces prêts garantis pour l'État ont profité essentiellement aux PME, TPE. 88% des entreprises qui ont emprunté, ces PGE, comme on les appelle, sont des PME, TPE. Donc, rentabilité meilleure et moins de faillites. Donc, on est loin du cataclysme qu'on avait craint, même si pour autant, on ne minimise pas le fait que les TPE et PME ont été très touchés. Un bref retour, un bref focus, parce que je pense que c'est intéressant de rapidement décrire ce qu'a été notre expérience du soutien aux entreprises pendant la crise du Covid, qui poursuit aujourd'hui. La France, comme beaucoup de pays de l'Union européenne et des pays de l'OCDE de manière générale, a mis en place un dispositif d'aide avec une palette d'instruments qui ont été là pour empêcher coûte que coûte la cessation de l'activité des entreprises et des plus petites d'entre elles. C'est ce que le président Macron a appelé le quoi qu'il en coûte. Il était prêt à mettre beaucoup d'argent, il fallait absolument préserver notre tissu économique et sauver les emplois. Or, alors il y a eu à la fois un cocktail, je dirais, de mesures, le prêt garanti par l'État dont je vous ai parlé, donc avec 90% garanti par l'État. Il y a eu l'activité partielle, donc les entreprises ont la possibilité de mettre leurs salariés en chômage partiel, donc payé par l'État en grande partie, des exonérations de cotisations sociales, donc c'est pour ça que je dis un cocktail de mesures, et le fameux fonds de solidarité, qui est peut-être la mesure la plus emblématique de toutes, 32 milliards d'euros qui ont été mis en œuvre depuis le début de cette mesure en mars 2020, un dispositif massif de soutien aux entreprises, visant à accorder aux entreprises qui avaient une perte de chiffre d'affaires de plus de 50%. Un dispositif qui a augmenté, qui a été raffiné, un peu sophistiqué au gré du temps. Au début, c'était uniquement les TPE, PME de moins de 10 personnes, les toutes petites entreprises, et c'était une aide qui était maximum 1 500 euros, qui compensait la perte de chiffre d'affaires entre, par exemple, en avril 21, vous avez un certain chiffre d'affaires, vous le comparez à celui que vous aviez en avril 2019, et on compensait à hauteur de 1 500 euros cette diminution du chiffre d'affaires. Petit à petit, le dispositif s'est étendu à des secteurs, le tourisme, l'événementiel, la culture, etc. Les montants ont augmenté. On est arrivé lors du confinement, du deuxième confinement en novembre 2020, décembre 2020, à des chiffres de 200 000 euros maximum par entreprise, c'est quand même important. Et puis, il y a eu des dispositifs spéciaux pour la montagne, Tout ça s'est accompagné également d'autres dispositifs pour aider les entreprises à prendre en charge leurs coûts fixes, et avec des subventions qui ont atteint jusqu'à 10 millions d'euros pour certaines entreprises, et qui étaient calculées sur la base de ce qu'on appelle l'EBE négatif. C'est-à-dire que vous calculiez l'excédent brut d'exploitation négatif et avec la possibilité de compenser cet EBE négatif. Donc, le dispositif, en quelques mots, a été élargi. Il était très automatique au début, très massif. Il fallait juste s'inscrire sur le compte des impôts. Et petit à petit, il a reposé également sur la présentation d'attestations par les experts comptables. Parce que quand vous prêtez 200 000 euros, enfin, non, pas vous prêtez, parce que vous donnez 200 000 euros à une entreprise, voire 10 millions, il faut quand même vérifier un peu que les chiffres sont là et que l'attestation est correcte. Donc un dispositif qui est devenu extrêmement massif, et donc au total, je vous dis 32 milliards, et jusqu'à tous les mois, c'est 600 000, 1 million d'entreprises qui font leur demande. Donc c'est énorme, et on considère que ce dispositif a permis de compenser notamment les coûts fixes des entreprises. Il a été complété par d'autres dispositifs, mais je ne vous en parlerai pas aujourd'hui, pour aider la prise en compte des loyers dans les centres commerciaux qui ont été fermés. Et donc aujourd'hui, on se dirige vers l'extinction, la sortie de ces aides, avec la réouverture, ce qu'on appelle le déconfinement, la réouverture des différents établissements, qui s'est faite par étapes. Et donc on a mis en place une sortie des aides dégressives pour accompagner tranquillement la reprise de l'activité, le but étant de ne pas pénaliser la reprise de l'activité, mais quand même d'aider des entreprises qui reprendraient plus difficilement, plus lentement, à ne pas s'écrouler. On les a aidés pendant des mois, ce serait dommage de rater la dernière marche. Donc un certain nombre de secteurs, comme le tourisme, l'événementiel, hôtellerie, restaurant, culture, bénéficient encore de ces aides, et les secteurs complètement fermés, le dernier secteur complètement fermé, c'était les boîtes de nuit, les discothèques, qui ont ouvert le 9 juillet, j'espère, je ne sais pas pour combien de temps, mais, et qui sont principalement des PME. Hein, voilà. Donc ça, c'est ces aides, je voulais faire ce petit passage, donc ces aides ont permis au tissu économique de durer. Alors maintenant qu'on a aidé les entreprises, qu'on a préservé le tissu économique, et c'est un peu la question du panel d'aujourd'hui, c'est en quoi les PME peuvent-elles être à la fois des acteurs et des moteurs de la reprise économique. Et donc là, parallèlement à notre plan d'aide assez massif, on a mis en place un plan de relance qu'on a rebrandé récemment, qu'on appelle France Relance, et qui a été conçu pour deux choses. Un, retrouver le niveau de richesse d'avant-crise de la France. Donc ça prendra un peu de temps, mais d'ores et déjà, on pense qu'au premier semestre 2022, on va retrouver le niveau de PIB qu'on avait en 2019, à différentes prévisions convergent. Et puis, deuxièmement, donc il a été bien calibré, parce que justement, on est déjà en train de voir cette reprise à l'œuvre. Et deuxièmement, faire en sorte que la France ressorte plus forte de cette crise, donc en répondant à trois problématiques, que le France Relance vise à répondre à ces trois problématiques. Un, l'écologie. Donc, favoriser la transition écologique de l'économie française, tout ce qui est industrie bas carbone, décarbonée. Deux, la compétitivité des entreprises en renforçant les fonds propres des entreprises avec un plan de reconquête industrielle, de relocalisation des industries, travailler sur les défis de demain, les technologies de demain. Et puis trois, la partie cohésion qui est quand même importante avec les dimensions de qualification, formation des gens. C'est un peu les trois axes, les trois réponses que l'on doit fournir, et donc ça se traduit par un grand nombre de mesures, 100 milliards d'euros, ce plan de relance qui a été lancé en septembre, dont déjà 40 milliards ont été mis en œuvre en juin, c'est les derniers chiffres qu'on a. Alors, le président Macron, lorsqu'il s'est exprimé lundi soir, a demandé à ce qu'on aille encore plus vite, donc on n'a pas le choix, on va aller encore plus vite, et l'idée c'est d'ici la fin 2021 d'avoir 70 milliards du plan de relance engagé. Alors ce plan de relance, on a souvent dit que c'est un truc pour les grandes entreprises, pour les grands groupes, et c'est pas pour les PME et les TPE. C'est une fausse idée, et on va essayer, nous, de chiffrer précisément la manière dont, parce qu'on est convaincu, il y a déjà un certain nombre d'exemples, la manière dont ce plan de relance, France Relance, bénéficie aux petites entreprises, aux PME, TPE. D'ores et déjà, on considère, mais c'est un peu au doigt mouillé, comme on dit, qu'il y a 40% de ce plan de relance de 100 milliards qui va bénéficier aux TPE, PME. Donc il y a des appels à projets, dont les lauréats de ces appels à projets, par exemple pour la décarbonation de l'industrie, ont été remportés. 2/3 des lauréats de ces appels à projets, c'est les PME, TPE. C'est un exemple. Il y a 15 000 entreprises PME agricoles qui ont bénéficié d'aides pour renouveler leurs équipements, leurs agro-équipements, et puis diminuer l'utilisation des produits chimiques. La numérisation, qui est un sujet très important, Le ministre Griset avait d'ailleurs eu le plaisir de s'exprimer lors de l'introduction d'un événement Digital for SMEs en février dernier. Il avait présenté ce qu'on fait nous en France pour essayer d'aider les PME, notamment les plus petites d'entre elles, qui n'ont pas forcément accès au digital, à se numériser, à se doter d'outils digitaux, à découvrir tout ça. Et donc le plan de relance prévoit ça. Donc, par exemple, il y a à la fois des dispositifs qui visent à aider les entreprises industrielles à améliorer leur niveau de digitalisation, leur robotisation. Et là, un exemple, sur 9000 entreprises industrielles, c'est-à-dire un tiers des entreprises industrielles ont bénéficié d'un dispositif qui s'appelle Industrie du futur, guichet Industrie du futur, 9000 sur un total de 27 000 entreprises industrielles. Et sur ces 9000, 80% c'est des PME, TPE. 20 000 aides du plan de relance pour qu'on appelle la prime à l'apprentissage, pour développer l'apprentissage en France en 2020, ont bénéficié à 80% à des PME, TPE. Et lorsqu'on parle de rénovation énergétique, comme je vous le disais, un des grands axes de ce plan de relance, France Relance, c'est d'aider la rénovation énergétique des bâtiments. Il y a énormément d'argent qui est mis là-dedans, parce qu'on se rend compte que les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, à 20%, elles proviennent du secteur du bâtiment. Eh bien, donc il y a des grands chantiers, 4000 et quelques chantiers de rénovation de bâtiments d'université, de résidences étudiantes, etc. Essentiellement, c'est pour faire travailler des PME, de l'artisanat, du BTP, et donc des jeunes qu'il faut également former à tout ça. Donc les métiers de la transition énergétique, les métiers de la rénovation du bâtiment, c'est des métiers d'avenir, et ça permet d'intégrer des jeunes justement dans des PME, des TPE de l'artisanat. Voilà, et j'oubliais, je pense que c'est vraiment ce dont s'occupe mon ministre, en gros 100 000 PME, plutôt du commerce pour le coup, qui ont été évidemment très impactés par les mesures de lockdown, pendant les différents confinements, les magasins, par exemple, ne pouvaient pas ouvrir, ne pouvaient pas accueillir le public. En France, on avait quand même un retard, encore, en numérisation des commerces, digitalisation des commerces. Et donc, les mesures qu'on a mises en place, c'est notamment un chèque, une espèce de voucher numérique, permettant à n'importe quelle entreprise fermée pendant le Covid, sous présentation de facture, de toucher, alors c'est pas beaucoup, vous me direz c'est 500 €, il y a 80 000 entreprises qui ont déjà touché ça, pour se doter d'un site internet, pour une licence, d'un système de réservation en ligne, etc., etc. Donc vous voyez, beaucoup a été fait dans le domaine du numérique, qui est pour nous essentiel en termes qui est un enjeu, un défi essentiel pour les PME, TPE. Donc voilà, le plan de relance, c'est pas que les grandes boîtes, c'est beaucoup les PME, c'est beaucoup les indépendants. Alors au-delà du plan de relance, il y a évidemment les réformes structurelles, qu'on continue avec la diminution du taux d'impôt sur les sociétés qui va passer bientôt à 25% en 2022, la baisse des impôts de production, 10 milliards par an, une grande partie de ces 10 milliards, ça concerne les PME, les TPE, donc les réformes structurelles, et là encore, le président de la République l'a rappelé lundi, on n'arrête pas, on les continue à la rentrée. Il y a eu le récent rapport Blanchard-Tirol qui demande également à ce qu'on ne cesse pas le rythme avec 24 économistes, ce rapport qui a été présenté récemment au président de la République, et qui demande à ce que le court terme continue à le traiter, mais qu'on n'oublie pas ces réformes structurelles de long terme, ou l'accent qui est mis sur les réformes structurelles. Donc, tout ça, évidemment, c'est essentiel pour les PME, même s'il y a quand même des défis auxquels il va falloir répondre, parce que le plan de relance est essentiel, mais des défis qui concernent d'ailleurs pas que la France, je dirais, et c'est le défi des pénuries de matières premières et de la hausse des prix des matières premières qui va du bois, de l'acier, du plastique, des semi-conducteurs, évidemment pas les seuls concernés, mais qui impacte particulièrement les PME, notamment de certaines filières comme le BTP, les travaux publics. Moi, j'ai eu des cas très récents d'entreprises qui sont prises en étau entre le fait de payer le bois 40-50% plus cher et puis des clients dans la promotion immobilière qui ont des prix non révisables. Et qu'est-ce qu'on fait pour ces entreprises? Donc, on est en train d'organiser des médiations de filières. Voilà, c'est un exemple, celui des pénuries de matières premières, de la hausse des prix des matières premières. Le deuxième, c'est les tensions de main-d'œuvre également, qui sont très importantes dans certains secteurs. Donc, ça renvoie aux problématiques de qualification, de formation, notamment dans le domaine de l'événementiel, dans le domaine des hôtels, cafés, restaurants. Vous avez beaucoup de gens qui ont quitté ce secteur parce que c'est très astreignant, c'est des horaires très difficiles. Et aujourd'hui, les professionnels considèrent qu'il manque 110 000 personnes dans ce secteur de la restauration, de l'hôtellerie et des cafés. C'est un peu les grands défis. Et puis je vais quand même terminer, parce que j'ai déjà pris beaucoup trop de votre temps, sur un projet sur lequel on travaille, que je ne peux pas encore vraiment annoncer, et sur lequel travaille mon ministre, parce que les PME, c'est aussi les indépendants, les self-workers, les travailleurs, les auto-entrepreneurs notamment. Donc c'est une myriade de publics. En France, ils sont plus de 3 millions. Donc vous avez, ça va du livreur de Deliveroo au freelance qui travaille dans l'événementiel, en passant par l'artisan boulanger, l'infirmière libérale, l'avocat. Donc c'est un public très hétérogène. Mais en fait, on se rend compte qu'on a un système économique, un système de travail qui a été créé, qui a été conçu essentiellement pour le salariat en France, et qui n'est pas toujours adapté à ces publics en termes de protection de leur patrimoine, en termes de formation. C'est des gens qui ont souvent un moindre accès à la formation. En termes de rebond, quand vous cessez votre activité, vous accompagnez. Public très impacté par la crise sanitaire, évidemment. Et donc, on travaille avec mon ministre sur un plan pour les indépendants, pour essayer de répondre aux enjeux de ce public particulier, les accompagner de la naissance, j'ai envie de dire, jusqu'à la mort, enfin, pas dire la mort, mais jusqu'à la transmission, parfois, de leur entreprise. Et donc, c'est un plan que je ne peux pas en livrer les détails, mais qui sera probablement annoncé à la rentrée, et qui est une mesure structurelle qui vise justement à faire en sorte que les indépendants, tous les indépendants, soient aussi acteurs de la reprise. Voilà, j'étais un peu long, mais bon, c'était quelques remarques, un petit retour d'expérience pour ouvrir le débat. Et encore une fois, je suis vraiment désolé de devoir vous quitter. C'est pas de gaieté de cœur, parce que je retourne au ministère. J'aurais vraiment préféré rester avec vous. Mais on est en train de travailler justement sur les mesures d'extension du pass sanitaire qui ont été annoncées dans différents établissements, qui justement impactent potentiellement beaucoup de secteurs de filières en France, soit les centres commerciaux, les restaurants, etc. Donc, voilà, j'ai besoin d'aller retrouver des équipes pour ça. Mais je vous souhaite à tous un excellent débat et merci à tous pour votre attention.
Well, thank you, Deputy Director Loyer, for those words in shaping the conversation around MSMEs and how they've been impacted by COVID-19. Next, I'm going to introduce a video, and there'll be a video from Tetin Masduki, the Minister of Cooperatives and Small and Medium Enterprises of the Republic of Indonesia. Tetin Masduki previously served in many capacities within the Presidential Special Office and within the government of Indonesia. The office in particular had the task and the function of providing support to the President and Vice President in carrying out the control of national programs, political communications, and management of strategic issues. Today, we're fortunate to have a video from Mr. Masduki, which will be shared to help us better understand the role of the Indonesian government in helping entrepreneurs recover after the COVID-19 pandemic. So please, let's see the video.
I, Teten Masduki, as a Minister of Cooperative and Small Medium Enterprise of the Republic of Indonesia, warmly welcome the publication of the 2021 OECD SME and Entrepreneurship Outlook in June 28, 2021. Close to the momentum of this year's MSE International Day celebration. This report is very useful for governments in all countries that are currently struggling to revive their economies, especially through empowering small business and promoting entrepreneurial spirit. With the magnitude of problem faced by entrepreneurs and small business during the pandemic, the government role has become very central to accelerating a fair and sustainable recovery process. In Indonesia, we have actively made various efforts to support and protect SME in this challenging time. As described in 2021 OECD SME and Entrepreneurship Outlook, there are three main issues currently faced by SME in almost all countries. The first issue is about SMEs and entrepreneurship financing. The government needs to provide a simple and inexpensive funding assistance during these difficult times. In Indonesia, we have run productive credential grant for micro enterprises for these past 2 years and new scheme of small business loans. The second issue is SME and entrepreneurship competitiveness. The government needs to encourage SME to expand their market overseas and prepare the local business to compete with the big player from outside. Regarding the second issue, we have carried out several initiatives, including four main measures: strengthening the database of potential product and market through single database, increasing the capacity and quality of SME human resources and product through various education, training programs such as export school standardization, certification, and factory sharing. Next is financing through several sources such as Indonesian Export Financing Institution, Revolving Fund Management Institute for Cooperative and SMEs, Himbara Bank with small business loan, and other alternative schemes such as crowdfunding, venture capital, CSR, and so on. Lastly, market optimization, both offline and online, through international and domestic export through marketplace, both B2C and B2B, and also SMEs logistics support. The third issue is about the innovation and digital transformation of SMEs. As well as now, the pandemic has accelerated the digital adoption process of SMEs. However, there are still many entrepreneurs and SME who enter the digital world without being equipped with sufficient knowledge and skills. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have been trying to improve the digital competency of entrepreneurs and SMEs in Indonesia through education, coaching, marketplace onboarding, and also National Public Procurement Agency. The effort that have been made by the government certainly require the support of all parties, including non-profit organizations such as ICSB. Let's continue to collaborate to support SMEs around the world during this challenging time. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
On the road to recovery, really? And have we done enough? Where do we need more efforts in your view? Welcome, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. The mic is on. Can you hear me? Is okay? Okay, great. I'm a little bit disturbed with all this installation. So, to introduce me, I'm the director of the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship SMEs Regions and Cities at the OECD, and as you can see, the title is really telling. We are focusing on this very important dimension of SMEs and entrepreneurship. Great pleasure to be with you today to participate in this 2021 ICSB World Congress. OECD and ICSB have been partners and good friends for many, many years. And I'm now very excited that this year we were again able to join forces, although under very strange circumstances. So I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation, and Heather, who is from our team, is going to launch the PowerPoint. Great, she did it. So today what I'm going to do, as Céline mentioned, I'm going to set the scene for the panel discussion. And what I would like to do is to highlight some of the key messages from this 2021 edition of the OECD SME and Entrepreneurship Outlook, which is a biannual flagship publication. I show it to you, and I invite you all, of course, to look at it on the website. It's full of very interesting, useful information. This was released only 2 weeks ago on the occasion of the UN MSME Day. So the 2021 edition is a special COVID-19 edition. Maybe you can show the next slide, Heather, please. Because she's going to show you actually the structure of the report. So it's a special COVID-19 edition that looks at the impact of the pandemic on SMEs and their prospect for recovery. The chapter 1 focuses on the short-term impact of the crisis, building on new results from a joint Facebook OECD World Bank survey that we conducted on a monthly basis during 2020, and which combines data from more than 100 countries from around the world. And these surveys look at SME uptake of support measures and their impact on performance. You just heard from Alexis about the support measure that France had put in place, but this publication look at all OECD countries. So you have a lot of interesting information and comparability. The first part of the report then draws on our new OECD SME and entrepreneurship data lake to look at key issues for the recovery, covering SME indebtedness, the question of global value chains, and the question, very important question of the SME digitalization. In part 2, we present 38 individual country profile with key insight on national SME performance and policy issue. So again, I'm flagging you the publication, and if you want to say good things, you have to turn to Sandrine Cargoache. She's here, she's the main author of the report. You can ask her any question about what is going on with SMEs and entrepreneurship. So the title of this session is Are Entrepreneurs on the Road to Recovery? And frankly, the short answer is, of course, yes. And you've heard from Alexis, but there is a but. Yes, because there are a lot of encouraging signs of recovery, but there is a but, though, because there remain major risk and longer term challenges. Governments and firms, we need to address these risks and challenges if we are to see the recovery that we want, the recovery that we need, that is a recovery that is strong, inclusive, green, and resilient. Next slide, please. So let me start with some data that I want to show you about the impact of the pandemic on SMEs. And as you can see on the screen, this graphic shows the share of total employment by SMEs in the sectors most affected by restriction put in place by government across the world. And you have the data for all OECD countries. And what we have seen is that on average, these most affected sectors account for about 40% of total business sector employment. But within this particular sector that are the most affected, SMEs accounted on average for around 75% of all of the jobs. And in Greece and Italy, the figure is even higher, closer to 90%. So really, it shows you how much they have been impacted. And of course, in some sectors more than others. In the tourism sector, for example, international tourism is estimated to have fallen by 75% in 2020, and of course, impacting many, many small businesses. Next slide, please. So this chart on the slide now shows the revenue losses of SMEs as the pandemic evolved during 2020. And the data comes from this OECD, Facebook, World Bank survey that I just mentioned. It shows that even among those SMEs that were able to continue trading during this very hard time, there were significant trade losses. For instance, among SMEs that remained open from May to December 2020, between 55 and 70%, they saw their revenues fall, with 2/3 dropping more than 40%. Another point is that the smaller the firm, the greater the impact. And for instance, SMEs with no employees, the self-employed, were around 10 percentage points more likely to be closed than SMEs with, the traditional one from 50 to 249 employees. Next slide, please. So in general, we have seen that government responses across at least OECD countries, they were bold, they were quick, they were unprecedented in scale. And the support was delivered through a mix of wage subsidies, business grants, payment deferrals, and loans and guarantees. And our report shows that in most OECD countries, between 20 and 40% of SMEs received government support in one form or another in 2020, although there are, of course, large country differences. And for example, here you can see some outliers. In Japan, support reached 62% of SMEs. They were much better in reaching out to the SMEs, but in Mexico, it was only 7%. So most support was directed at mainly tackling short-term liquidity constraints and was often accompanied by changes to insolvency processes. Please, next slide. So massive public support has helped a large wave of insolvencies. And this is what, again, the French representative has shown. In the case of France, it was the case almost, in many, many countries. And the charts on the screen that you can see, it showed changes in bankruptcies in 2021 compared to 2019. Of course, you cannot see, you're not able to read the detail, but what you can see, the pattern is very clear. Almost all countries have seen lower levels of firm failure during the pandemic than the year before. And our analysis shows that in the absence of government support, business failure rates would have tripled. So we would have, of course, a large waves of bankruptcies, which did not happen because of government support. And while there remains a risk that government support and temporary measures only delayed some of these business failures, there is a question mark about the future, still prospects for most firms are much better today. At the OECD, we just released the economic outlooks. We expect global output will rise by 5.8% this year, which is a revision from our last December projections, when we anticipated growth of just 4.2%. So 4.2% now, 5.8%, so it's much better. Next slide, please. So going forward, although very high uncertainties remain, there are positives to reflect upon. But there are, of course, key challenges that lie ahead. The first and most obvious of this is that the pandemic is still with us and new variants are emerging. We should not forget that. That means that restrictions may still be needed and emerging support as well. But when circumstances allow, the withdrawal of measures will need to be carefully planned to avoid a wave of bankruptcies. And as part of that, we need to look at ways of dealing with the debt, the question of the SME's debt, accrued by the firms during the crisis, because this may prevent we need to prevent holding back the recovery, and we need to pay particular attention to the question of the SME's debt. We also need to encourage the new ventures and businesses that will be key to renewal. And of course, as government looks ahead to the recovery, there is an opportunity here to address longer-term structural issues. So let me provide a little bit more of detail on each of these issues that I mentioned. Next slide, please. So one of the key messages that we highlight in the report is that we need to learn lessons to improve the targeting of support during periods of trading restriction and social distancing. So while government support was overall quite successful, there are still some groups that have not been reached as effectively: the self-employed, again mentioned by Alexis previously, but also the smaller and the younger businesses, as well as the women and the minority entrepreneurs, as well as SMEs in some sectors. For instance, in the case of culture, you know, they have a particular status and they were not entitled to receive the support. And the chart on the screen shows that on average across OECD countries, 15% of SMEs that start operating in 2020 received government support, compared with 45% of SMEs aged 5 years or more. So the younger, they were not so much helped as the well-established SMEs. And less than 30% of SMEs with no employees, the self-employed, received support, compared with more than 50% of SMEs with more than 10 employees, and this is shown in the right chart. Next slide, please. A second message concerned the SME debt, and I just mentioned that. In their response, governments and firms have relied heavily on repayable loans and guarantees, and as shown in the chart, of the 55 countries in which we have been tracking policy response, 48 of these countries have used direct loans and 46 have used loan guarantees. So SME debt levels have risen rapidly, and just to give you an example, the Bank of France estimated that SME debt has increased by more than 20% in 2020 to reach 524 billion euro, which is huge. In the United Kingdom, in the year to March 2021, SME debt grew by 26%. So these trends are quite worrisome. They not only threaten the solvency of many of these firms, but also they limit the scope to invest more funding in the recovery. So governments really need to unwind this measure with particular care and look for alternative instruments, not just bank, but also non-debt instrument to support firms going forward. Is working a lot on this issue. And it might also be necessary to support firms to restructure existing debt. Next slide, please. A third message of the report is that while managing the support for existing firms, governments also need to encourage new ventures and businesses. And the good news is that after collapsing at the outset of the crisis, startups have since recovered. The chart shows the recovery in firm creation in the G7 countries, and we can see that in Japan and in the United Kingdom, for example, overall business creation in 2020 was 15 to 20% higher than in 2019. So there is a rebound, but we don't know how many of these businesses were born temporarily of necessity rather than them being innovative, new ventures with a real ambition to grow. We therefore need policies that encourage and support innovative startups. We need policies that to encourage the second chance of those entrepreneurs that they were in bankrupt because of the crisis, and they are looking to start new ventures. So we need to put in place a mechanism to support what we call the second chance, and we also need policies that encourage greater diversity in entrepreneurship, that is targeting more women, targeting more ethnic minority across countries. Next slide. A last message that I want to highlight from this report is that we need to now to look also at the future. We need to find ways to ensure that our business and regulatory environments enable our SMEs to scale up and grow and help to boost productivity, growth, and resilience. That means supporting access to skills and finance, tackling an even playing field, as well as moving to digital and climate neutrality. One potential silver lining here is that there was a step change during the pandemic in the question of the adoption of digital tools. We have seen that 50% of SMEs increased digital uptake during the pandemic, and a large majority of these firms have declared this change to be permanent, as shown by the chart. And another point is that SMEs also need, of course, to play their part in the green transition. Some are already doing that, but to embrace the green transition, there is a need to have more information, more incentive, more access to finance to all the SMEs. So to conclude, frankly, the pandemic, the economic impact of the pandemic on SMEs has been disproportionate. We have to recall that. Public emergency packages, they have played a key role in keeping many firms in business throughout the OECD, not just in France. And while there remains uncertainty, a recovery built on the resilience of millions of SMEs seems to be in progress. Economic prospect is brightening, confidence is slightly, slowly returning. New businesses we have seen are emerging, but of course we should be very careful not taking this for granted. We need government to put in place the right policy to unwind support measures, manage escalating debt levels, and address longer-term risk. At the OECD, we work on all these issues, and we will continue to do so. We're going to deliver soon an OECD strategy for SMEs that is going to provide a kind of roadmap for government for the future to support the SMEs. And now I would just want to close by a very personal note. Today it's a hybrid session, but we have a chance to be in a place where we have students. We are missing the students. At the OECD, we have been paying a lot of attention to the question of youth. The OECD has just launched the Youth Action Plan, and in our department, we have just launched the Stand by Youth initiative, making powerful call to all the business around the world to take action to support the young people, the young graduates like you. So I invite you to look at the hashtag Stand by You and to be vocal to help all the other young people that are not necessarily in a prestigious school like yours, but they are disconnected, and to keep the momentum, because we will have to make sure that we are not sacrificing this great young generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lamia, for those remarks. Please, the report is available online. It's really a useful tool with data to really show you what's going on, especially within the OECD countries. And we're pleased to be a partner, as was outlined. We just celebrated UN MSME Day, and we're pleased to have OECD once again to be a partner and to be a speaker. The next speaker on this panel, I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Ahmed Osman, Chair for the International Council for Small Business, and he's the Managing Director of the Global Entrepreneurship Network in Egypt. He's also a project manager and strategy advisor for several government and private organizations in Egypt. Mr. Osman is the founder and CEO of a project and facility management firm in Egypt called Chrome. The company currently manages a construction portfolio exceeding $1 billion. Chrome established the first training academy in Egypt, focusing on upgrading the skills on construction professionals. He's also the chair of ICSB. And so, and at ICSB, we have the unusual perspective of viewing a large spread of entrepreneurship and small business stakeholders at once. And so the question that I'm going to pose to Mr. Osman, to Chair Osman, is that balancing the needs of researchers and policymakers and students and practitioners, now you have to balance these things. What have you observed as best practices for those small businesses and ecosystems, and what should we look for in recovery? And so please give a big round of applause as Mr. Osman comes up here and shares his perspective.
Good morning. Bonjour. Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction, Winslow, and I'm very, very happy to be with you this morning. ICSB is a platform, and we like to work with partners, and we are very, very happy to be working with our partners at IPAC and ESCA and obviously OECD for the panel this morning. So I thank you once again. I'll bring in a perspective of what ICSB has done in terms of response to what has happened in COVID-19. Obviously, COVID-19 was an unpleasant shock to everyone. The world went to a complete standstill. Myself as a business owner, I woke up in the morning and everything was locked down. I didn't know what was happening. And as days passed, I became more stressed, I became more upset. I didn't know what was happening. The end of March came, I had to pay salaries. No income. What am I going to do in April? What am I going to do in May? I didn't know. And to be very honest, as the OECD report just presented by Lamia said that 40% of businesses in OECD countries and probably globally have basically gone to a complete standstill. It was entrepreneurs who basically said, we're going to come back and try again, have a second chance. And us as ICSB, again, we reformulated what we're doing, and we came up under the direction of our CEO, President Ahmed Tarabishi, to come up with what we call the new ICSB. Next slide, please. So at ICSB, we do three things. We do research, we do education, and we support policy advocacy. But what is in the heart is the small business owner, okay? Why do we all do this stuff? Because we want small business owners to flourish. We want them to succeed. 90% of the economies of the world are SMEs, 75% in some countries, but 90% in most countries are small business owners. So without small business owners, the global economy will not grow. GDPs of countries, I've come to France this time, went through passport control in 15 minutes. It was pleasant, but you walk down the streets, the tourists are not there. The vibrancy of the city of Paris is not there. It's coming back, but it's going to take time. But obviously, SMEs are what we all work for. So, young people in this room, we are here to support you. Whether the research we do, the education we do, and we have a large group attending our ICSB Youth Academy, and whether any policies we are doing, and we're listening to OECD, having a call for action for youth, but you are the future of the world, and we're just here to help you move forward. So at ICSB, we turned into like a normal company. We went into a mode where we went digital, okay? And most companies did that. 50% of global companies went and embraced the digital world. They started selling online. They started changing their business delivery model. And some of them did it in a very, very good way. Obviously, others working in certain sectors, such as tourism, hospitality, etc., could not, because there are no tourists, there are no people walking into your bakeries or cafes during this lockdown. So, the heart of the global economy, and it's now, the heart sometimes is ill, but it's on the road to recovery, and we're going to regain our health, and we're going to, as a global economy, come back from this pandemic. And we've learned a lot of lessons from what has happened. So as policymakers, They've learned to respond quickly to what is required by the economies. As business owners, we've learned a very tough lesson that life isn't always nice. There are very bad days. And as educators, obviously, switching to online, not interacting with students face to face. I've seen my kids, just sitting there behind the laptop and just not understanding. My son does engineering, and doing engineering online is just something I could never imagine. It just doesn't make sense. But he's passed his first year, so I think it worked. Next slide, please. So, response to COVID-19. ICSB responded to COVID-19 by creating a lot of digital products. We have webinars, hundreds of them, addressing different topics and issues, addressing people in different continents, in different languages. And the different languages is something we did for the first time at ICSB. So we have webinars in French, Spanish, Arabic, and obviously in English. The second thing is we turned digital in terms of the delivery of our education products. So education in terms of certificates were done online. Education in terms of our ICSB Youth Academy was done online. And obviously our online conferences, which started off as early as April 2020. So we were really the first organization to embrace the digital world in terms of delivery of content. And today, we're sitting here today with a room full of people, and also we have hundreds of people watching this online via the Hoover app and via Facebook Live. So I think this is truly a hybrid format, and this was our response. Second thing was we reached out to our partners, our UN partners, OECD, our education partners, and everyone, and said, how can we work together to basically offset the effects of this pandemic? And in this crisis, it was very pleasant that we all came together and we basically created things together. And we had an excellent MSME Day celebration last June in 2020 and this June in 2020, and it was organized by these 6 or 7 UN partners alongside ICSB. Next slide, please. So I have a message I wanted to deliver to small business owners, and I'm one of them. Okay, so I think the message is quite simple. Okay, I think the word entrepreneur is glamorized today. It's something everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and it's like the fashion of this era. And entrepreneurship normally reflects the image of successful people, okay, who have profitable businesses, and their businesses just grow and they make lots of money and they have nice houses and flash cars. But the truth is, this representation of entrepreneurship reflects a minute fraction of entrepreneurs. The reality is 8 out of 10 startups fail. Is that right, Munzo? Yes, it is. Okay, the reality is that starting and running a business is psychologically and mentally distressing. I think it's years of dedicated and hard work and relentless hard work that make you succeed. So being an entrepreneur is a powerful and rewarding experience, but the reality is often not what you expect. So what is the reality of entrepreneurship? The reality is that there are very, very many hard days and a lot of ups and downs. And I'll tell you, the downs are a lot more than ups. Okay? The next thing is that stereotype entrepreneurship, which is what is portrayed in our mind, is that entrepreneurs make a lot of sacrifices, okay? And the sacrifices are personal, they're financial, and they're emotional, okay? So it's important to have a very, very strong game plan as you embrace this route of entrepreneurship. And something which entrepreneurs need to really understand is they play multiple roles, okay? So you might be your bookkeeper, you might be your salesperson, and you might be doing tea and coffee, okay? So I think multitasking is important. Entrepreneurs learn a lot of things from playing multiple roles. They become more resilient. And in the future, because of the experiences they've done in multitasking, they become good managers of their subordinates if they're allowed to. Also, in entrepreneurship, you can be self-employed, so you can be a one-person company, as some countries call it. And self-employment is key to a number of industries throughout the world. So achieving overnight success is extremely rare. It's actually a myth, because building a business is a very long-term process. So when a business starts, founders face rejections, and sometimes they do mistakes. And mistakes are obviously, when you're writing a policy note and there's a mistake, it doesn't affect a lot of people. When you're doing research and the statistics are not true or not accurate, it doesn't affect. But when you lose your money, you're gone. Okay, so as an entrepreneur, your mistake is something which can kill you. So my final message is that globally, entrepreneurship is now becoming politicized. We're seeing government support for entrepreneurship in France, in Indonesia, as we saw earlier, and in lots of countries. And entrepreneurship is now becoming politicized and is promoted to young people as the only route for employment, which is not the truth. So I'm afraid such propaganda creates a dream of wealth and quick success for many young people. And as the reality is different, this may lead to resentment from younger generations. We have to be careful in what we promise our young people and explain the facts, and starting a venture with complete transparency is a lot of hard work. I thank you, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. We are now traveling to Brussels, where we're very lucky to have Hubert Gans, the Deputy Director General of the Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs Directorate at the European Commission. Welcome, Mr. Gans. And let me trigger your intervention by asking you the following question. At the EU level, what can you tell us of the magnitude of the hit that has been taken by entrepreneurs and SMEs, and how do you see the recovery going forward? In particular, we know that the EU has launched important initiatives such as the EU SME strategy, recently the Great Industrial Strategy. So how do you see these initiatives driving the Build Back Better between green and digital transformation? Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for having me in this session of the ISCB. I want to say that first start with what Lamia presented. You know, the OECD SME and Entrepreneurship Outlook 2021. It was very interesting to see this data. It very much coincides also what is our impression of the impact of the crisis. And that, of course, now we are in the recovery phase, and we have to really pool resources and efforts to go ahead to help SMEs, because there are, of course, risks that are existing. But I want to start also with your question, what happened with the crisis? And I would say it is very fair to say that entrepreneurs and SMEs have been particularly affected by the COVID-19 crisis. In 2020, we have noticed that the value added in SMEs in the European Union fell by -7.6%, and 1.4 million jobs in SMEs in the European Union disappeared. And of course, what was necessary, the support that member states of the European Union and at the European EU level, the support measures that we put in place, they have helped businesses to stay afloat. But it's also true, of course, and evident that not everyone was affected actually in the same way. The employment in the digital sector actually increased by 1.5% during the crisis, because this was a sector that, where many companies and particularly SMEs turned to this sector for help to keep their sales channel, to develop new sales channels, to have some possibilities when their shops were closed. So I think the crisis brought, of course, challenges, but also, of course, opportunities. Now, you mentioned the strategy for small and medium-sized enterprises that the Commission put forward in March of 2020. And for us, it has been and continues to be the key tool for supporting small and medium-sized enterprises. Its priorities are digitalization, sustainability, and very much, due to the crisis, resilience. And the leitmotif has been leaving no one behind. And this is, of course, even more important now coming out of the crisis. Of course, these efforts, we share them with what happens at member states level. And Alexi has described very well, the coherent efforts that are made in France to help SMEs to get out of the crisis, to benefit from the recovery. Now, when the crisis hit the European Union and the member states, we tried to react immediately to provide support to entrepreneurs and to small and medium-sized enterprises. For example, we advanced the launch of Escalar, which is the new investment approach that we developed together with the European Investment Fund to support venture capital and growth financing for promising companies. Its ultimate investment potential is up to 1.2 billion euro to contribute also to the strategic independence of the European Union. InvestEU is the new investment support program, and it consists of 4 windows, and one of them is a window specifically for SMEs, under which financial products for the benefit of SMEs and small mid-caps companies are set up. And altogether for the next 7 years, there is a budget for 6.9 billion that is earmarked for this. We also use still the COSME, the program of the last years for SME financing, and the INOFIN financial instruments, that we reinforced them due to the crisis by 1 million to help 100,000 SMEs and leverage around 8 billion of financing to come in. But what is also very clear is that the COVID-19 crisis has given increased momentum to deliver on the green and digital transformation that we see necessary for the EU economy as a whole and for SMEs in particular. And now it's about building on the recovery as an opportunity to accelerate these joint efforts to make our economy also more resilient. And therefore, our objective is to support SMEs in building the necessary capacities and creating, these pathways that will accompany them in this transition for the industrial ecosystems in the European Union. The European Green Deal has to be the new growth strategy for European companies. And yesterday, the European Commission has put forward a bundle of 12 proposals that should make us fit to for reducing, for becoming climate neutral, reducing the emissions by 55% by 2030. But we have to do it, of course, in a way where we at the same time help and support companies in this transition, and make it, develop also this green business case. We want to stimulate green innovations through regulatory measures, but also dynamic standards. We want to mobilize investments in renewables and accelerate, for example, solutions using hydrogen as one of the energy sources of the future. We look at batteries life cycle, carbon capture solutions, and electromobility. And these are areas where there are a lot of business opportunities for SMEs. Now, I think businesses have realized, and they have signed up to this green transformation. There is a clear business case, and I think also companies see the advantage of being among the first movers. But for SMEs, of course, there are challenges with that. So we need to combine this, accompany them with support at EU level and at member states level. And the recovery and resilience plans that member states have put forward in the last weeks, that the Commission has now looked at, there we want member states to support the economy, to support SMEs with investments, but also with the necessary structural reforms. And Lamia has referred to that also. The recovery and resilience plans, they are part of a 750 billion recovery package that is the Next Generation EU initiatives. And we need this to give a major boost to SMEs, providing this unprecedented support. We have to make sure that funds are available for SMEs for their efforts to digitalize, to upskill their workforce, to provide training for the workforce, and also to participate in opportunities that public procurement gives them. Now, it is also clear, I think, that digitalization is a key enabler for this transition. And the European Union has set itself in the Digital Decade communication targets that we want by 2030, 75% of the EU companies to use the EU cloud, artificial intelligence, and big data. And we want 90% of the SMEs to reach at least a basic level of digital use of means and methods. And we will work there, with a network of digital innovation hubs. It has to become operational. We will work with the Enterprise Europe network, with clusters, with the initiative of Startup Europe. I will mention that. I will come to that. To assist SMEs, all these initiatives have to assist SMEs to deal with the disruptions, with their vulnerabilities, and to increase their resilience by diversifying suppliers, by connecting to new local and cross-border partners and markets. I think undoubtedly we will all agree that data will play a key role in that. And so we have to make sure that the SME data is more secure, that SMEs have access to data, because data is really the new raw material for many, many new business models. A lack of infrastructure there can make market entry difficult for SMEs. So, solutions like cloud computing are becoming essential. We have also to incentivize data sharing and the reuse of data, and also ensure the fair access of data for SMEs. The bundle of measures that we have put forward in the SME strategy remains therefore our compass also in this recovery, also in the mid and long term. So we are busy implementing the 33 actions that are in this SME package by using, for example, one that I want to mention in the sustainability area. Sustainability advisors will become part of the European of the Enterprise Europe network. Very important in that respect also is the reduction of regulatory burden. This is and will continue to be a key priority for us, because we know in particular SMEs are suffering from administrative burdens. They are the ones that suffer most, because bigger companies have it much easier to deal and have the resources to deal with a complicated regulatory environment. But we have to make it sure that SMEs can also deal with it. I mentioned startups and support. In March of this year, the Commission launched the EU Startup Nation Standard with the member states. And we want to mobilize member states to implement best practices for startups to ensure that they have the right condition, the right environment, the optimal conditions to scale up in the single market and in global markets. In May, very recently, the Commission put forward an update of the EU industrial strategy, and includes also learning the lessons from the crisis and how we can accelerate the green and digital transformation. And how can we deal, with the disruptions that the crisis has caused in production, supply chains, transports, persons' mobility. And here, it has also taught us the lesson how important the single market is, and a well-functioning single market, because due to restrictions on the mobility of services, goods, person, the single market took quite a battering. And I think we have to learn how to make it better in future crises. And this will be also one initiative. We will also put forward initiatives to be better. So I think we can look forward to recovery this year. The EU SME value added is forecast to grow by 5.8% in 2021. And also employment will increase, EU employment in SMEs. But we still will need some time to recover fully from the crisis and to reach actually 2019 levels in that respect. But I think we all agree that we need to pull together. We need to help entrepreneurs and SMEs to come out of this crisis stronger, because they will really drive the recovery on the ground. And we have to do it together with, focusing on the human talent that we have in all parts of the world, actually, to focus on the entrepreneurial spirit that we all have in all parts of the world. And to make sure there are possibilities for new responsible investment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director General for those remarks. Next speaker is Inez Groucho. She is the Director of Financial Products, SME Finance Development, EBRD. She has a very impressive background, and so I please ask you to visit EBRD to learn more about her and her resume, and I'm pleased to bring her on now.
Good morning from London, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. I know we're a little bit tight on time, so I will be brief. I would like to share with you a very short presentation on what the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development is doing to support SMEs in the Building Back Better and on the road to recovery. We have a small business initiative that does about $1 billion of investments per year and reaches just over 250,000 SMEs in our countries of operation, which are mainly Central Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Northern Africa. We do this by indirect financing, so through our partner banks, but also directly financing SMEs. And also we have a very large network of consultants on the ground that do business advisory to SMEs directly, and a strong component of policy dialogue working with governments and authorities to establish rules to support SMEs. Now, this is, you can see here also the regions that we operate. So we operate in less advanced economies, so somewhat different region than the OECD countries. However, many of the issues that have been raised today also are visible on our region. Now, and let me talk to you about what EBRD is doing in terms of the Building Back Better for SMEs. And our strategic capital framework highlights three main points, which I was very pleased because it came up in a number of the interventions today. So the first one is digitalization. So we've had, in particular over 2020 and first half of 2021, all our services, advisory services, have moved into digital. We've launched an e-learning platform. We've launched digital mentoring. We've helped actually quite a lot of companies into digitalizing their services. And as research has also shown, the digital component is really a key one for companies to navigate through the crisis. The other one is green and ESG, and also some of my panelists, colleagues have spoken about it. It's important for SMEs to be part of this Building Back Better and start thinking more about green and environmental social governance concerns. So, how can we bring SMEs to think a little bit more about making their business models a bit greener? And then finally, gender and economic inclusion. We know that women have been disproportionately affected by the COVID crisis, as they are, often the main carer for children, for elderly people, and so they have been much more affected. Also, young people, with the job losses and more precarious type of work. So I just wanted to give you a couple of examples of what we are doing in these three main areas. So on the green economy, we are developing products to support the green transition. This could be, for example, energy audit for companies, or a technology selector. So we have for example, a website where the SMEs can choose better technologies that are more energy efficient to support their businesses, or for example, circular economy training. And we're looking also into ESG type of funds. We have actually one for in the Western Balkans that with the support of the EU that we are replicating now with an ESG focus. To give you a case study, this is an example of a project in Turkmenistan, which EBRD has financed on the installation of hydroponic greenhouses. And we gave them a loan and then, advisory connected to green economy. We have a flagship program called the Women in Business program that supports women dedicated credit lines. And I'm very pleased to say that actually during the pandemic, we've expanded on this program, in particularly in Central Asia, but also West Bank, where we also operate. And the idea here is that we give specific advisory to women, but also better access to finance through our partner institutions. Finally, the last digital transition, we mentioned there was a drive to digitalize accelerated by the COVID pandemic, and we are working on a number of projects. In fact, over a third of our consultancy projects this year have been related to digitalization. And I want to finalize my intervention actually by bringing you a case study of Tagadot, which is a waste management startup. So EBRD, we also have a startup program. And the startup enables waste collections through tech-based solutions in Egypt. But I wanted to actually to show you a video on this company because it shows how the SMEs, a startup, it's a small company, how they've actually changed their business model to cope with COVID. So let me just, hopefully this works. Let's try that again, sorry. I'll have to probably.
The coronavirus was one of the reasons that got us to embark on the challenge of the hand sanitizer. Before the pandemic, we were mainly targeting geographical expansion in Africa. This had to be, of course, delayed because of the ban of flights. And what we found was that the household collection demand was growing very high. So this is what we focused on, and we were able to grow household collection almost double or triple the rates that we were growing with before the pandemic. At the beginning of the pandemic, alcohol was not widely available in stores, and we started finding our partners, our network, our employees are calling us to find whether we can do it or not. And we thought of doing it to help our close ones use it and benefit from it, since it was a very simple process. So the biggest impact working with EBRD has been getting executive class support into our company, which is normally something that you wouldn't be able to afford, but the impact of it is so great that it stays with the company for years.
And that's also one of the projects that's been supported by the EU. So I'm very pleased to share this with you today. And with that, that's I would finalize my intervention, and thank you once again for having me today.
Well, thank you very much, Ines, for joining us today from London. At this point, I need to apologize to the participants because we're running late on the session. Just to explain a bit, we're kind of piloting a bit of a hybrid format here. So we have the speakers connected remotely. What you don't see probably on the Zoom is that we have an audience in the room as well that I want to acknowledge and to thank. After that intervention, let's travel back to France. I don't know where exactly in France, but let's travel back to France. And we are very grateful to Thibaut Bechtoy, the president of Croissance Plus, to join us today and to give us a bit the perspective of entrepreneurs and businesses in the discussion. And in your view, Thibaut, from the perspective of Croissance Plus and its business community, what would it take for the recovery to be led by SMEs and entrepreneurs? Thank you very much for joining us. Tell us where you are, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm actually in Paris, and very happy to be here with you today. Like the former speaker, Ines, I will try to be short because I think it's been, we're running over. I also would like to apologize for my English because I don't practice these topics in English every day about economy and things like that, but I will do my best. So just a few words of introduction for Croissance Plus. So Croissance Plus is an association comprising 350 entrepreneurs from small companies, a few million euro, to 200, 300 million euro for our biggest members, okay? And we are in every sector of the industry. It could be tourism, events, industry, high tech, etc., which is interesting because it gives us a very broad perspective of the economy. I have really two small parts. The first part is what it will take for entrepreneurs to get out of this crisis and be on the road to recovery. And the second part is about more at the macro level, because I believe that an entrepreneur can also has the right and also the responsibility to contribute to the more macro level, as any macro topic gets back in the end in the P&L of the company. So the first point for entrepreneurs really is to increase their level of competence on financing instruments. In France, the economy is financed a lot by debt. People have to open their equity to external investors. And I think this investment in equity is absolutely the most important point. In fact, we are working on some proposal to the French government right now, where we're suggesting a new scheme that we would call the growth shares. So basically investing part of the personal saving that was increased by the pandemic. In France, at the end of 2021, we will have saved, an additional 200 billion euro. And if part of this investment, let's say 100 billion euro, would be invested in SMEs, that would be tremendous and in fact necessary to get the SMEs back on recovery for the next 10 years. Right now, the balance sheet are very unbalanced because of the PGE, the thing that was mentioned by the former speaker from the Ministry of SMEs. PGE, which is this government sponsored loans, and this issue of reinforcing equity in the company or opening equity to external investors is absolutely key. So that's the first point. The second point is that we strongly believe that entrepreneurs have to work very strongly on strategy. Really think about, how is my sector impacted by the crisis? Let's say 10 years out. What are going to be the dynamics of my market? Are people going to consume very differently? Like one of our members is in the luxury hotel business. What should they change? But I could take many examples for online services and others. So they have to think about how the sector is impacted by the crisis. They also have to think about M&A opportunity. So very often, SMEs don't think or don't allocate too much time on strategy. Here, I think it's absolutely essential to have some bandwidth, like 5% per year or per month or per day, whatever, spent on strategy, because this is going to be absolutely key. And also a third point, that has been mentioned quite a lot. We believe that our entrepreneurs at Croissance Plus have to focus on sustainability. And when I say sustainability, it's really, green investment, but also sharing, as we say at Croissance Plus, the fruits of the growth. Everybody has to benefit from the growth of a company, and we are pushing schemes whereby companies could allocate 10, 20, or even 30% of their shares to their employees. And basically, it's not only a few people that benefit from value creation in the company, but it's really much more than that, okay? Another element linked to sustainability is also that entrepreneurs we should have more entrepreneurs working on society topics. As you know, in France, we have a huge public spending. Last year, it was in 2020, it was 64% of GDP. And my strong belief is that strategically, we should build a nation of entrepreneurs, but on broader topics than just tech topics. Macron talks a lot about, creating some unicorn stuff like that. This is great. But I think also the entrepreneurs should work on how to better insert or include senior people in the economy. And that could be a project. In fact, it could be a big project. So we are advocating the fact that not only entrepreneurs should work on society topics and thereby decreasing the level of public spending. If we work on unemployment, Pôle emploi, the government agency, spends 5 billion euro on this employment program. If more entrepreneurs and the private sector would invest more on these topics, we could decrease the bill of public spending. Okay. So on, and we could talk about, also inserting young people, or trying to develop employment in areas where the industry has been closed, for some reasons, like worldwide competition and others. Okay, so it's really broad society topic. So then I will just finish at the macro level. We need to contribute. An entrepreneur is not like, in his little company. Any topic at the macro level, like 64% of expenses on GDP in 2020, is reflected on the P&L of your company. Okay, so as I said before, our country, and I'm sure other countries in Europe, but it's more specific to France, we should absolutely work back on a trajectory of reduction of public spending. The former presenter from the Minister of Economy talked about the decrease of the production taxes, which was up to 72 billion euro and is decreasing from 72 to 62. But 62 is way above the average of the OECD countries. Okay, it's at 1.6% of GDP. So we are taking, a big hit on this public spending at the level of SME every day. Okay, so one of the proposals we're making on this topic is one of the big spend on public spending is actually retirement. It's about 15% of GDP in France. And we are making some proposal with some economic think tank about introducing an evolution to a funded, so this is where I don't have the right words, but a funded system where it's retirement is proposed by a pay-as-you-go, classical pay-as-you-go scheme, but also you start investing in what we call capitalization, which is, I believe, funded pensions. Okay, and if you do that, you really create a long-term, system that spends less on retirement, and in fact, €1 invested on this funded, system is worth, 4 times more than it would be on a pay-as-you-go topic system. The other thing that we need to work on is actually when we talk about investing equity in SMEs, you have to work on the complete food chain. You have to work on, so the food chain of investment goes from friends and family to VC, round A, B, C, D. But also, if you look at the strengths of the US on the tech economy, the GAFAM and the cybersecurity companies, it's very linked to the stock market and to the NASDAQ. So we need to invest more on kind of a European NASDAQ. And when I talk about this, it's not like kind of a big, long-term project. If you want to invest in companies, you have to find exits. Okay, investment and exit are completely linked. Today, European-wide, I would say that the exit system is weak, and that can, leads companies to being sold to US companies or to go on the NASDAQ market. So this is what I wanted to cover very briefly from the entrepreneur side and from a more micro standpoint. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for those remarks. We really apologize. There's so much that we could have said and done, and with your background with the 3 Common Bay Networks, I'm a chip guy myself, so I understand exactly where you're coming from. And with Inez, with your experiences, so much can be learned. And what we have learned over this past year, that that even though the ongoing crisis continues, we can no longer ignore that there are fundamental cracks that we thought that were impervious to adversity. And although the last year and a half has been difficult in many ways for a tremendous number of people, we now have the opportunity to rebuild stronger and better than before in ways that readies us for any unexpected events at any level of intensity. It is an opportunity that is before us that shows us the necessity in continuing to join together so that we may advance MSMEs in the future. With that said, I pay my sincerest thanks to today's keynote speakers, panelists, and my co-moderator for your generosity of time and expertise, and to our panelists and our attendees online and in the audience. This is a hybrid conference, and so we're doing something that's never been done before, but we think this model will continue. We want to really thank you for working with us and being experimental with us. And once again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I would like to present those who are in attendance, and we're also going to make sure that we're going to give these medals of appreciation for those speakers who have who are here, but also online. So I'd like to call up my co-moderator and present her with a medal in ICSD World Congress 2021 medal. I'd also like to bring up Ms. Lamia Chawi as well. Thank you. And it brings me great pleasure and joy to ask my friend and colleague, Chair Ahmed Osman. I'd like to introduce. With that said, we're going to wrap up the session. Once again, thank you for taking